All right, so now moving to being able to produce your APA paragraph for the correlation test in SPSS. I want to emphasize that we are working with a Pearson's correlation. There are different kinds of correlational tests, but for the one we are working with specifically, you want to make sure that this language at the top of this paragraph is explicit to this test. So, including here a Pearson product moment correlation, that is the type of test being used. So, please make sure that that language gets carried through into your APA paragraph. Was conducted to examine the relationship between age, and here is the range of ages from 12 to 60, and weekly hours worked from 0 to 60. There was a weak positive correlation. How do we know that? So if you look at the test output, in this red highlighted area, all the information that we need for this write-up is presented here. So this 0.10 at the top that corresponds with this Pearson correlation, that is our correlation coefficient. So remember from the chart where we were looking at strength and direction of correlation coefficients, when we, if we're working with a negative value, we would have a negative symbol. We don't, which means that we are working with a positive symbol. And we also have a correlation coefficient of 0.10. This one happens to very neatly align with the table's outline of 0.10 representing weak. However, you may not always have a very clear indication of weak versus moderate versus strong, so on and so forth. So you have to use your judgment to align your value with the closest category, right? I would say, if you're between, let's say you calculate a correlation coefficient of 0.20, which falls between, weak and moderate, you could even describe that as being a weak to moderate relationship, right? So if it were 0.25, probably, round that up to being a moderate relationship. If it were, 0.15, probably round that down to being closer to a weak relationship. So you do have to use some judgment. I'll do my best in any way that I'm asking you to interpret results to make it a fairly clear correlation coefficient so that you're able to be as successful in identifying when you have weak versus weak to moderate versus moderate to strong, so on and so forth. Okay, so that's where we're getting the weak positive correlation language here. Between age, we have our test statistics, a mean, standard deviation, and weekly hours, our test statistics, mean, and standard deviation. We have R of 1006. Now, in this, if you happen to recall, for many instances where we're writing our test results, we have our degrees of freedom within these parentheses. That is still the case here. However, you may notice that 1006 is not very, neatly represented in this highlighted area. And that's because with correlation, with Pearson's correlation, I'm not totally sure why. SPSS doesn't provide you with the exact degrees of freedom. You need to calculate it yourself, which means you'll take the n of 1008 in this case and subtract 2 from it, because that is our degrees of freedom formula. So we have degrees of freedom of 1006 equals our correlation coefficient of 0.10 as pulled from this highlighted area with a probability of 0.001 significance value. It is exactly 0.001. It is not less than 0.001, which is why we're using the equal sign. And then this continues to say, with age explaining 1% of the variance in exam scores. Now, if you're wondering where that 1% comes from, that's from the formula for coefficient of determination. From the presentation, I introduce you all to the coefficient of determination, which is taking our correlation coefficient, in this case 0.10, multiplying it by itself. So 0.10 multiplied by 0.10, which equals 0.01. You then take that value, multiply it by 100, or move the decimal 2 places to the right, which will give you a percentage. And in this case, it came out to be 1%. And so that means that in this relationship that we are examining in this test of the relationship between age and number of hours worked on a weekly basis, age only explains 1% of the variance in exam scores. Remember that the coefficient of determination gives you a value that is more easily communicated to your audience, and it helps them make a little bit more sense of your test results. So these results suggest that there is an increased age is significantly associated with higher weekly hours of work, but only by 1%. So that's all for this APA paragraph. As always, if you have any questions, you know where to find me.